And just like that, it's another episode of the Pentecast podcast. My name is Andrew Bella, your host. Alongside me is my cousin today, Devin Birdsong. Welcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to be here.
I didn't think this would ever happen. There's a lot of things this year that have transpired that I didn't think were going to happen. One of those is you stealing the idea of a podcast.
It worked out great for me.
Everybody knows, if you've watched the podcast, watched any of my episodes, you can hear me reference my cousin Devin's podcast that he started around the same time that I did. We kind of bounced back into ideas from some things that you wanted to do and then some things that I wanted to see. So we're going to get into this. I've invited him onto my podcast.
Oh, it's an honor.
Yeah. What do you think about the video?
I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Would you say that this setup would be better than yours?
No, I would never say that.
Oh, man. No, it's good. It's good to have you. Only thing that I wish Ryan was on this trip with me.
I know. I'd love to meet him.
He's a great guy. He really is. I want to get into the thought, and we kind of talked about this on your podcast. I don't want to rehash the same thing.
Look, dude, that's all you've done since the beginning. You got the equipment first, and then you started copying my content.
Yeah, well, your jokes are riveting. I can promise you that.
Thanks.
But I don't want to go over the same story again. Well, I started and you started. I would like, though, to go this aspect of it, because this is one thing that I think is worthy of mentioning. When I threw the idea at you about starting a podcast, you really weren't sold on the idea.
No. And the reason is I love listening to podcasts.
You actually got me started listening to more podcasts. I like I said on yours, I got on like informational podcasts, like short little podcasts that I enjoyed. But I don't think I ever listened to them as many as you did.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got me on the whole podcast kick to begin with. And so when I threw that idea at you, you didn't let me know this at the time, but you weren't really sold on the idea.
Well, the thought that comes to mind is everybody that's ever been on the radio is professional. You know?
Yeah.
I had a couple of guys that I listened to that weren't professional podcasters or didn't go to broadcasting school, obviously, but they were entertainers. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, okay, what does some Joe out here have to say that anybody's going to listen to?
Yeah, so I'm just a Joe, I guess, is what you're saying.
I really kind of thought that. Well, I'd heard you on the phone.
No riveting content there. I thought it was interesting you having the background of podcasting and then, kind of, not resisting, but kind of being a little...
I was skeptical.
Skeptical of the idea.
Yeah.
But then something changed. I guess when I got my equipment, you really saw that I was going head first, and something kind of sparked you to do your podcast.
Well, what happened is you started yours. You sent me some of your raw cuts, and I was like, first of all, I was blown away by the sound quality.
Okay.
So I was like, wow, that's an amazing sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been intrigued with that kind of stuff anyway, because I love listening to podcasts. Mm-hmm. Like 10 years is how long I'd been listening.
Yeah, and it's kind of incredible because a lot of people, you talk to them, I don't even know what a podcast is.
I know. I still encounter that.
Oh, yeah, me too. On a daily basis when I talk to them, I'll bring up my podcast and I'll say, I'm on Apple Podcast or whatever. And you know what's crazy? Everybody has an iPhone, but they have no clue that they had an app that was downloaded on their phone when they bought it.
Right.
For podcast.
Right.
And it's grown substantially, the art of podcasting. I think one of the main things that I like about it the most is that you can bring minimal equipment and you can share a memory. This is going to be, etched in stone forever now.
Yeah.
Us sitting down and number one, you're not only just a cousin, you're a friend of mine, but it's memories and moments like this in our lives that it's like they're faded memories, So I think capturing those really makes a difference. It does for me. I go back and listen to them and watch them, and I say, man, that was a good episode, or it was a good memory.
Well, if you can ever relax and just talk, it's amazing to me how much I forget that is said between friends. Mm-hmm. Until you go back and listen, you're like, wow, that happened. Mm-hmm. Or it's unbelievable how much you forget. And it caused me to think about all the memories of great friends that I've had that have gone on. I forgot so much of what they said.
And you wish that you wish you could just hear it again.
Yeah,
you know?
Or hear their voice.
Yeah.
I'm a listen learner, I think. So I retain a whole lot more of what I listen to than what I would read.
Yeah.
And so the power of audio has always been awesome to me. And you can build unbelievable pictures in your mind just by hearing someone's voice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. And also, you know, the lessons that are learned over time that are just faded memories, you know, faded memories. I think capturing those quality moments of life are really important to me. That's kind of what my podcast has been about, capturing amazing stories from people. And I think what it's done is, you know, you go to church and you hear there's really no new message to preach.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can find a new way to convey the same message, but the gospel is the gospel. And with that said, as a church person, I don't want to lose the art of communication.
Right.
I think it's powerful. I think it's changed my life. Not really messages that there's obviously tons of messages in my life that have impacted me that I can remember even to this day that have touched me. But really what made a difference in my walk with God was sitting down in a living room with, of course, your mom and dad.
Right.
They were my pastors when I first had received the Lord. And sitting down and talking with them and opening my heart. And it's kind of like not a lot of people get that. You know, as a lay member, you go home, and I'm not saying that you have to have a preacher or a pastor to have these type of conversations, because they happen in every kitchen room, every dining room. And so those moments where I was talking with somebody about the Lord, I was hearing their testimony, how they're making it through. That's what made a difference in my life.
Right.
You know, where somebody was willing to open up. They didn't have this church mask on and pat me on the back and say, just keep going, son, you're going to make it.
Yeah.
I needed someone to be real with me. And I found it in a conversational setting, not necessarily in a sermon, where they sat down and talked to me and said, hey, look, I've had these struggles. I know where you're at. I know what you're going through. And to me, that meant everything. And so what I've tried to do on my podcast, and number one, I'll put a plug in for Devin's podcast. You can go and listen to him on all podcast platforms. And he has amazing content. And you're going to get a laugh, but also you're going to hear some awesome life lessons that you can apply to your life. And so go on and check him out. And how can they email you?
You can email us at devin@podme.org. Once again, that's devin@podme.org.
I love it. So maybe I'll get some feedback on this episode.
You oversold that way.
Did I? Whenever I did it the other day, or?
No, just now.
Why?
It doesn't. We're not that easy to talk about.
I think you are. I think you're great. So tell me, so when you started your podcast, what was your vision at first, or did you not even have
My
one?
original intent was, okay, the world shuts down. You've bought this audio equipment. So I told Hannah, I want a way to communicate with our people. We were all confined to our homes. We were in the middle of a revival when the world shut down.
Was it with Brother Jerry Pascarella?
Yes.
Okay, I remember.
So Tuesday of that revival, we thought we were going to go all week long. We shut down, didn't know when the doors were going to open back up again. So by the following Sunday, I felt this overwhelming need to communicate with our people. It's like, what am I going to do? So I go to the church, and I had a message. I pressed record on my iPhone and preached a little message. And then that next week, I told Hannah, I said, who knows how long this is going to go? I want a way to communicate with our people. So I said, this is kind of cheesy doing it through my iPhone.
Right.
I would like to buy a nice piece of equipment, but I don't know if I'm there with the podcasting yet.
Really?
And so I purchased the equipment without really being fully committed.
Was that a mistake?
I don't know. But I really feel like everything that I've got into with the podcast has been on accident. It wasn't my idea in the beginning. The world shuts down, and I'm like, I'll buy a nicer piece of equipment. Actually, what I did, I was too chicken to buy the good stuff. So I ordered a piece of equipment that was supposed to be in like a week, and it never came. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to go with the nice equipment. So I stuck I put myself out there, bought the equipment, and then when I get it in, set it all up in the kitchen, and you told me what I was going to do.
Play with the trackpad.
Yeah, you're gonna get it all set up. You're gonna have fun for a little bit, and then you're gonna be like, man, what can I talk about?
Dude, because these ideas are coming to your mind. They're firing off, and you're like, oh, if I just had this equipment, I could hit record and go. You hit the red button, it's like, snap.
Oh, yeah.
What in the world? You know?
That's extremely intimidating.
Yeah, of course.
Well, then I had this desire. I've always loved people's testimonies, that maybe an obscure part of their testimony. So I had this in mind. Brother Mike Blue was my first episode.
And that was an incredible episode, and I saw him in a completely different light.
Well, he had told me when he was preaching a tent revival for us, he told me part of his testimony that I'd never heard. And I was like, Brother Blue, that's incredible.
Really?
Which he's an extremely humble man, just like me.
I can tell. Yeah, your spirit bears witness.
And I called him and I said, hey, I'm thinking about going with a podcast. I don't have a name. I don't know really what to do, but I would like to tell your story if you'd be willing. And he was like, well, let me get a few things together. Very gracious.
Yeah.
We recorded like 2 different sessions for me to get enough editing done to make it all work. I mean, it's all brand new to me. Mm-hmm. Very overwhelmed. But when
and you were on the phone quite a bit during that time.
But when I got it done, I was like, I think this tells his story in a way that people may have never heard it.
Yeah. So
my personality is not at all to be out front. Now, on the podcast, we talk about I've left myself room to be totally goofy.
Right.
You know.
And I think that's been a shocker to everybody that I talk to, that like at my home in Georgia, everybody that knows you, they know Brother Devin, the preacher. Yeah. And also you come from a long line of great men of God, you know. Your grandpa, Brother GW, I reverenced him ever since I met him because he was just an incredible man.
Yes.
Always had a heart to do ministry from a young age.
Right.
And he passed that on to his son, which is your dad, Lyndall Birdsong.
Right.
And pretty much everybody knows, you know, what he's done in his ministry and what he's still doing today. And so with that, you have that long line of, you know, just these gospel.
Say it, Andrew. Seriousness.
Well, yeah, definitely seriousness. But the thing that I've heard so many times, like about your podcast, is I never thought Devin was a, you know, we say cut up, but you know, really what I think it is, because we just did an episode on joy, and I thought about you, which we did the little fun thing about your podcast on that episode. But when I look at you, I see the joy of the Lord. And I'm not saying that just to pump you up, but honestly, I feel like you operate and you live in the joy of the Lord. And it's refreshing. You know, people can gravitate to you. But then again, what I think is a great, great attribute of yours is you know when to have fun, but you also know when it's time to seek the Lord and have a service for Him, you know, in church.
I think there's a big dividing line, Andrew, with the sacredness of the ministry. Mm-hmm. So there's something in my life that's never been a joke, and that's the ministry. Mm-hmm. It is paramount to me. Not that I'm a great minister or whatever, but that is such a sacred space, and it's really it's something that if someone were to feel, I don't know, a negative impact from, it would hurt my spirit. It's that sacred to me. Mm-hmm. So even criticism in that area, it's tough to take because that is a high calling.
Yeah.
So I've always, in the pulpit, I'm not a jokester there. Some people, when it comes to the pulpit, it's interwoven with their personality, that they're, you know, you can't separate their personality from who they are in the pulpit. And I'm not trying to live 2 different lives. It's just that's always been a sacred space to me. And that's never been who I was in the pulpit. One time Hannah was asked, is he ever serious? And she was like, okay, when he's in church, he's dead serious.
Yeah.
And I take everything about my life. I think to a degree seriously, but man.
Yeah, I know, but you got to be real with people.
Yeah.
And this, what you see in the pulpit, and I know I say a lot on my podcast, nerd alert, because I know what we're saying, it can be interpreted the wrong way.
Right.
But you got to know who's talking here.
Right.
There has to be a level of transparency outside of the pulpit. That office of a preacher, when you're behind that pulpit, what you're doing is sacred. You are reaching for lost souls, or you're trying to encourage saints of God to continue on their journey. One of the two. And when you're preaching, you don't understand all the dynamics in that service. Of course, when I pastored, I didn't even realize I got into a form where I was reaching better than just getting a sermon together. And so I take it just as serious as you do. But outside of the pulpit, you have to be relatable to people. And I think Jesus showed us that perfectly when he was, giving his sermons. He talked very serious, and he spoke in parables for people to understand them. But he's the same guy that's willing to walk in a house, eat supper with sinners, and be a friend to them.
Yeah.
And I think that, once again, going back to the episode that we aired a few weeks ago, it's so important to have joy operating in your life. We have to have a gospel that people are willing to purchase.
Right.
And I mean that. And they say, well, they just got to get tired of their sin, of course. But we've got to have something available to them that's better than what they are living, And like I said, I just think that's commendable that you know how to operate in the joy of the Lord. So
one of the intimidating things about doing a podcast was, okay, the people at church have a relationship with me outside the pulpit as well, so they understand me. But it's intimidating when you get behind a microphone like this and nobody knows you, and you're releasing it for anybody to consume. Are they going to understand where you're coming from? So you almost have to form a relationship with your listeners, and if you're adding new listeners all the time, there's going to be some that don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I had a fellow come to me at a church we were visiting. He's like, I just want to tell you, I love your podcast. He said, but your serious episodes speak way more to me than your lighthearted stuff. And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff right here is not so sacred to me as like what a message might be or whatever.
And I think that's the uniqueness of the podcast.
It is
because you can sit down and have a conversation with anybody you want to.
Yeah.
No, you're not, people say, well, you can't just let anybody do this and this in the church. Well, on a podcast, I can sit down and talk to whoever I want to.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's really unique to this type of ministry.
It is.
And I think that the art of communication, there again, the art of knowing how to communicate with people is so huge. It's so huge.
Well, here about 2 years ago, probably, or 3 years ago now, I guess, I was teaching a Sunday school class in the church we pastored in Arkansas. It just hit me one day. Here we are. Everybody's making little statements everywhere, whether it's through text message, whether it's through social media. Everyone's making little statements, and nobody's actually listening to the other person. And that bothered me because I've built walls between me and other people that I've never even sat down and had one conversation with. So I actually had said this here a few weeks ago on our podcast. I said, I hope this does for the listeners what other podcasts have done for me. I've heard stuff on other podcasts what I take home to my family, and I say, what do you think about this? This was thrown out as someone's opinion, but it really made me think. And that's, we use humor a whole lot on our podcast, and Dustin Wakely and Brad Cottrell, amazing guys.
Absolutely.
Their friendship has been great. Me and Dustin have been friends since I was 14. I didn't know Brad as well until we went to pastor there. But these are guys that my kids like to sit around and listen to after church talk. They're the whole group of guys at our church have a similar sense of humor. So I wanted that to be the vehicle, but I also want to leave every time something for someone to think about, maybe that would provoke a conversation somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think one episode, like you talk about that thought-provoking talk. I've never looked at a seagull the same way. You know, I always wondered why they weren't called bagels, but that episode really spoke to me.
Please go check that.
It really spoke to me. I think it's huge, the art of communication, sitting down, talking with somebody, and leaving them with a thought. I took a Dale Carnegie class. I think I told you about that. Man, there are things that I took in that class that I, to this day, use. I think me and you were somewhere the other day, and I called the person by their name, by their name tag. It was at Starbucks, and I got a discount.
Yes.
Yeah, Brother Robbie Guthrie would be very proud of me about that. But my birthday was the other day, and on my app it said, you know, you get a free coffee or whatever. Well, it expired a few days, and I just asked the lady, you know, if I could get a cup of coffee, and she said, yeah, we'll do it. But I looked at her after she was handing us our coffee, and I said, thank you, whatever her name was. And she said, you're welcome. And just calling somebody by their name speaks volumes. And one thing that the Dale Carnegie class taught me was you have 2 ears, one mouth. You know, the Bible tells us to be swift to hear, slow to speak. But in a Dale Carnegie class, they had us in a circle, and I thought this was a great exercise. I really did. They had nothing but complete strangers in there. Me and my boss's son, Aaron, went together, and so automatically, human nature, things that we don't even think about, me and Aaron walked through that door together because we were the only people that we knew in that room. So automatically, here we are joined at the hip, and because we didn't know anybody else. Yeah. And so we get in this circle. He and I obviously sit next to each other. All these other guys that worked, there was like 10 of them. They all worked together. They all sat side by side. And so the instructor gets up. He goes, hey, we're going to start with an exercise. There was like 35, 40 people in here, okay? So it's a huge circle in this auditorium or whatever. And he says, everybody get up. And so we all get up, you know, like all nervous. He said, let's form a circle. So we're all in a circle. He said, this is the first exercise, and this is kind of going to introduce you to what Dale Carnegie's all about. We're like, all right, here we go. He said, look at the person straight across from you. And I look at this total stranger trying to make eye contact with him. It was so weird. And he says, okay, for the next 30 seconds, I want you to walk to that person, and I want you to get to know them now. Boom. This circle just goes. It was the most awkward thing I have ever experienced.
I guess.
And I thought I was a talker. You know, I thought, oh, man, I can talk to anybody. But here's this random person. I'm like, hey, you know, what's your favorite color? And so now, after taking that class, and also pastoring helped big time, because you have to be invitational.
Right.
A pastor that's not, you're really missing out, honestly. But not walking into a church, not walking into a place of business, not walking into any place looking for somebody I know, but looking for somebody that I could spark a conversation with. I think you just mentioned it earlier, that there's people that are probably around your inner circle that you've never even tapped into their lives, and they have amazing stories, you know. And I think the art of podcasting and communicating shows that there are a bunch of amazing people around us that we can tap into their lives. So you've added, and you mentioned Dustin and Brad. You guys have kind of gotten your groove with your podcast. One thing that you asked me on yours is kind of what's your future? I want to kind of throw that question back at you. What is the future of Pod and Me?
I wish I could tell you. Like I said, everything's been an accident so far. Even Brad and Dustin, I asked them to come on for an episode because I was looking to tell someone else's story every month. And you know how it is trying to set up an interview. It's tough.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was kind of hitting a creative wall. It was like, I don't have any inspiration. I don't want to ask everybody the same 3 questions.
Yeah, I didn't either.
And I don't want the same testimony to be put out every time, because I don't want, everyone's an individual. I want to tell an individual story. So I asked them to come on because I knew they had a friendship, and then me and Dustin had a friendship. And the luxury of doing this, if you record something that you don't like, you can never air it. Yeah. Just leave it off the air. So we got together, and they were both reluctant, nervous. We got together and talked for like an hour. And then I edited it down and sent it to them. They were like, that's good if you're good. Well, then like a week later, I told Hannah, I said, I think it would work if they were regulars on the podcast. At that point, I didn't know if we was going to go the humor route or whatever. That's my personality.
Right.
But we recorded another episode, and I felt like this is where we need to go. Honestly, Andrew, I never advertised anything. I released Brother Mike Blue's episode without telling anybody, not even the church. I may have shared it with I released Brother Blue's episode without telling anybody. I released it to our church group just for them to hear his testimony. After that, I've never said another word inside or outside of the church about the podcast until people started discovering it from other sources. It's been shared a few times,
right,
here and there, but I'm not a self-promoter, so I didn't want to advertise. So everything we've done has been on accident. Mm-hmm. Me and Dustin and Brad started doing the whole humor thing. That wasn't any huge thing in the beginning. It just, you know how it is, stuff develops when you're talking.
Yeah.
And they turned into what they are on the podcast.
Yeah, and I think they fit their roles perfectly. I really do.
They actually are. Dustin actually is a deacon in our church, and he's the deacon on the song or on the podcast. And Brad is actually our song leader at our church, and he's what we call the song leader on the podcast. We have it kind of set in a church humor setting. It's released Wednesday, which is midweek service. It's been an accident. Where we're going in the future, I have no idea. We do feel like it's a challenge to stay creative.
Yeah.
And, to introduce something new. But they brainstorm, I brainstorm. We get together, no rehearsal really. I kind of tell them where we're going to be at the end of the episode, what kind of main content I want. And then other than that, I get my stupid little jokes together. And
I need that app because those jokes are riveting.
Oh, yeah.
Those jokes are riveting.
It actually, to me, that's the luxury of doing what we're doing. It's working for us, but the luxury is I'm not taking myself serious, so you don't have to either.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it takes off that facade. You know what? We're Christians, but we're also people who know how to have fun.
Yeah.
We're everyday people. We're everyday people, ordinary people.
We can do self-deprecating humor.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid at all of people to make fun of me here. Like I said, the ministry is a sacred space for me.
Yeah.
If I need to be corrected there, let my wife do it. She can talk to me very, very in a corrective critic.
Yeah.
She can be a corrective critic, and I can take it from her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she loves me more than anybody else in the world.
Yeah. Well, that's probably true.
Yeah, it is.
Oh man, no, I've really enjoyed you coming onto the podcast, and I hope my listeners and my viewers, the people that know me, have got to know you better. And if you want to, I encourage you strongly, go check out Brother Devin Birdsong's podcast, the Pod and Me podcast. If you want lighthearted humor and everything in between, go back and listen to some of his older episodes where he's got some amazing guests on there. But we do appreciate you coming on.
Amazing guest as in?
Me.
Oh. Hey, thanks, Andrew. It's been awesome.
See you later, man.
Yep.